What's up, y'all? Y'all are listening to Living Corporate's flagship podcast. If you didn't know, Living Corporate helps organizations build employee engagement and market trust through data analytics and data transformation, our e-learning platform, and brand marketing storytelling. We're so excited for you to be here today. The conversation you're about to hear is going to connect the dots between employee experience and go-to-market effectiveness. If you're not ready, get ready. Here we go. Dr. Claudy Jules crazy. So, I think about Living Corporate when we started back in 2018. We were talking about, I think, personal brand. I think that was like one of the topics. And was talking about like, man, like who are people that like you've met? You're like, man, like their personal brand like really made an impact on you. And I told a story about, and I didn't say your name at the time because you're a pretty private person. And I was also kind of like, I don't want to, I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. So I didn't say your name, but I had a very clear description. So people who listen, who know me and know you probably knew I was talking about you. But I was talking about the time when I was on a project at Accenture and we were at a hospital, and the partner on the project was like, yo, we're bringing in somebody to talk about leadership and to talk about career and talking about impact and change and transformation. And I was like, cool. And so then I remember I was sitting in the little computer room and like the door saying, and I turned around and I was like, what? And this dude walked in. He was suited. He was suited. You had a French cuff on, but you didn't have a tie on, and you had a cane. And I was like, and of course you was black. Your headline was just as intact as it is now. You had dope glasses on, and I was like, who is this? This is crazy. And then like you were like, hi. You were like, what's up? And I was like, what you tell me what's up, right? And so then we got all together and we were talking about we did introductions, and you were like, yo, my name is Claudy Jules, Dr. Claudy Jules, but I go by Jules because it's cool. And everybody was like, I just remember in that moment, I was like, dog, I'm really trying to get like this dude. Like that was the first time I feel like I've ever been like taken aback by a black person at work. And I remember when we spoke, we had like some quick exchange about generational difference and workforce of the future. And I remember the manager at the time was dismissive of it. And it's just ironic because workforce of the future, generational difference, and preparing for Gen Z is like a hot topic. It continues to be a topic. And you did not dismiss it, and you were like, holla at me. And I just remember that moment. When I think about the handful of times of like, man, this is like, when I think about brand and vibe that I want people to experience, as well as, because this was way before, this was in 2018. This was, because I talked about this in 2018, but this happened in 2015?
Yeah, it was almost 10 years ago. That's right.
Yeah. And man, so I say all that introduction and context about you just to say, welcome to the show. Jules, how you doing, man?
Zach, I'm well. Thank you so much for having me. And gosh, what a context that you've painted, and a humbling one for that matter. So it's a real treat to be on the show with you. I've watched how you've created something from nothing, an idea to this, and so much more to come. So really excited to be on this journey with you in some shape or form, and, have some fun with some conversation and dialogue today.
It's wild, man, because so much of the discussions I remember I would reach out to you about in just terms of navigating the world of work, like they were evergreen, right? I was talking about the leadership I was experiencing at the time, getting advice from you in real time, advice and context around how to navigate, identifying what's static and distraction and what isn't. And then, I also think that so many of those, frankly, every exchange that we had during that time. Because again, you're right. I was like 10 years ago. I think I had just got married. I certainly didn't have no kids. Um, I think I had just bought my first house. So life was mad different then. And
sure.
yet those discussions are just as relevant now, man. Like, let's just talk a bit about like your specialty, your point of expertise, what you got your doctorate in, and why that space. Like let's start there, and then I think that'll help open up to some other things.
Will do. So as you pointed out, I am a doctor, but a doctor of philosophy. So I do hold a PhD in organizational behavior from Case Western Reserve University, which at the time when I was admitted into the program was one of three top programs in the world focused on organizational behavior as identified by the Financial Times. And there was something about the pedagogy, or more appropriately, andragogy, in terms of adult learning principles and the way the curriculum was set up and the faculty and their specializations around leadership, appreciative inquiry, emotional intelligence, experiential learning theory, organizational change, that for someone who had been a student and a practitioner, if you will, in this field of organization development, I was a kid in a candy shop. And so CASE felt like the right program for me, also because of the highly experiential element to the program that was unique for its time for a doctoral program. Having said that, I never set out to be a leadership guy, even though I know people sometimes approach me or associate my sort of body of work with that. I always thought of myself as an org guy. And over time, I was an org guy who just happened to specialize in leadership. And I still hold that view. And because to me, at the end of the day, whether you are working with an individual leader or are operating as an individual leader, and whether you are leading a team or a business unit or even a region, that it's always in the service of the broader context, being the enterprise. And so I'm a big believer in systems thinking, systems theory, in that what affects one part of the organization will have a much broader impact. But leadership was just one of those things that I stumbled onto. And to a good friend of mine, their credit, at the time when I was at Accenture in the strategy group, and we were trying to launch this leadership advisory practice, client-facing practice. I was pretty junior in my time in consulting, and they said, "Hey, we're going to launch this new service line, and I want you to be right there with me." I'm like, I'm not a leadership guy. The hell do I know about leadership? I'm an org guy, right? It's like, no. You know a lot about human dynamics, organizational dynamics, and just human behavior in social and organizational context. Mm-hmm. And over time, I realized I had the sort of equipment in terms of the practice, certainly the theoretical background. And now I was just given an opportunity to build something and be very entrepreneurial that took me on one hell of a ride to then eventually help build and eventually lead a practice area focused on helping leaders be better versions of themselves. And in the process of doing that, helping their enterprise, whether it's for-profit or social enterprises or even government institutions, to just help them run them better, more effective. It's sort of the theme that's been sort of the culmination, even sort of my body of work around building better organizations, that if you help leaders be better versions of themselves, they'll by default build better organizations that they lead. And I still hold that premise. But that's sort of where it started. But the point of origin, if you will, I always tell this story, but because it's true, which is I got my interest in this field of organizational behavior, human behavior, by way of the classic film, The Silence of the Lambs, with Anthony Hopkins Jr. and Jodie Foster. And I wanted to be Jodie Foster. I wanted to be Clarice. I thought she was badass. Here was this agent who had this incredible rich exchange and just had this incredible astuteness around just being just super aware of her environment and the exchange, the dialogue that she and the character Hannibal Lecter would occasionally have, and the quick pro quo and the clues. And I said, well, where do I learn to go be like that? And that set me on a path to psychology. And at the time, I thought, maybe I'll be a psychiatrist or forensic psychologist, or maybe even a clinical psychologist, not really fully understanding and appreciating all the different subdomains of the discipline. And what was interesting was, the one thing I didn't want to be was an IO psychologist. I'm like, I want to work with people. I don't want to work with organizations, but here I am. I'm a senior in high school, taking Syracuse 101 level course in my high school and just getting introduced to the field. Fast forward, that's really where I cut my teeth in doing a lot of psychometric assessment work, working with instrumentation to assess leaders and to assess consulting teams, given my first job out of university. And so, but Silence of the Lambs really was the catalyst that got me interested in this sort of idea of understanding human behavior, and particularly the interpersonal psychiatry or interpersonal interactions that people have, and the different sort of reference points that people bring to any conversation, regardless of where their whatever reference point that might be, and how people can connect or not connect as a result of that. So I'll pause there.
That's incredible. And, I remember, again, like I think about just influence and impact, right? And I met you and I was like, dang, I think I want to get something IO Psych too. And I was looking at an IO Psych MBA at, it was like at Baruch, I think, something like that. And I was, yeah. So I was looking around. I was like, I was very close. I was very close to like pausing. We had talked about it, right? I told you what my top 10 were, and you were like, wow, you didn't take them. Don't go there. You didn't go. And we ain't going to say the name. You're like, don't go. You should go over here. I was like, all right, cool. So, it's interesting. I'm going to cut to it because, I don't know how next time I'm going to get you on the podcast. All right. So we going to just get to the shit. All right. So listen, Jules, you actually were somebody that I saw as, like, you were three people, right? I'm this time I'm actually going to say the names. So you, Dr. Claudy Jules, another black man named Matamba Austin, and a black woman named Carmen Alston. So Matamba Austin, Carmen Alston, Claudy Jules, who I genuinely was like, who I saw and said, okay, these are the most learned black people, and not just like theoretically astute, right? In terms of like, okay, I had whatever, but like who actually understand how to practically navigate the workplace that I have ever seen. And yet, despite that, and frankly, like, what I'm saying, like, this is gonna sound funny, but I'm not trying to be funny, right? So I saw you, right? Trim, know how to dress. Again, you had the cane, and the cane was swag because the cane coordinated with the fit. Not ashy. So your personal brand was phenomenal. The way your presentation, right? So in terms of how you articulate, speak to your experience and your journey, you were also well respected in the space, right? So like, in fact, so well respected that like, even when you weren't in the room, the person who's now a senior partner at that firm was just very excited about you being around. And then anytime I mentioned you around the firm, well respected, right? And yet, like, you did not sit in a place that I thought you should have, right? And if I was to look at your white counterparts who are not as degreed, who are not as well dressed, who are not as like, and I say this unironically, articulate, like truly speaking to the expertise and connecting the dots between their learned expertise and practical applied expertise, did not check all those boxes, and yet they were more senior than you. And like I said, the reason I mentioned these other two people, because I would say the same, what I'm about to say, I would say the same thing about them is wildly talented, degreed, certified, credentialed, and I'm going to just say proven talent who happen to look like me. And yet, when we go behind the scenes, we're actually kind of fighting the same things, despite the fact that I was a senior, I think, analyst, and you over here about to be an MD or whatever. I'm curious as to, one, do you agree with my assessment? And if you don't, I would love that too, of the fact that despite your objective excellence, you are not the CEO of something. And salute to Marty Rogers, right? Marty Rogers, my bad. Marty Rogers the fourth. Marty Rogers might be the exception. He's the only person I would say where I've seen a black person who is authentically themselves somehow be able to like be where it makes sense for they to be at. Do you go ahead? Go.
Yeah, I maybe a younger version of me would have agreed with much of what you described. Perhaps a pissed off version of me too. But time, like anything else, gives you the opportunity to reflect and make sense of situations and look at things to understand what was your part in it. Where I sit today is from a place of, yeah, I may have had expertise, and even saying that out loud sometimes, I'm a big believer in lifelong learning. So saying I'm an expert in anything sometimes feels like
you didn't arrive, but yeah,
I get you. However, making a difference in the world or an impact on an organization, or in this case, a client, goes well beyond just expertise. It requires what I would characterize as leadership and in experience, which fundamentally boils down to judgment. And my academic or my practical experience needed to catch up with my sort of academic background and training. And there's no substitute for experience, real talk. And what I attribute to the acceleration of my catching up, if you will, over time was, one, I had incredible mentors, people who cared enough about me to tell me the truth and just invest in me. Not all of them were Black. In fact, many of them were not Black. Not all of them were men. In fact, quite a number of them were women. And I take that because it's important to learn as much as you can and to be open to learning from as many different kinds of people as you can, even the ones where you feel like you have nothing in common with. But there's something always to be learned about even asking the question, well, why is that? And that's just my stance and orientation in the world. So, no, I don't agree with the assertion you make in who I am and how I show up today. And I will say, as one other point to that, is the importance of also just being willing to learn and being open to feedback. And, quite frankly, you got to earn your stripes, right? Nothing should be given to you. I'll share an important piece of myself that I think is important for you to hear, and certainly your viewers. Look, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in East Flatbush part of Brooklyn. At a time, 70s, 80s, crack epidemic, single mom. Although I had lived in a house that my extended family was there, my grandmother, aunt, uncle, and cousins. So I didn't feel like I grew up like an only kid, even though technically I was. And education, in my mom's view, was the key to progression, to a better life. And so that's always been instilled in me in terms of being focused on education and academic excellence and the like. But something else was important, which is grit, and you having to put some elbow grease into it, if you will, and really just pour yourself and immerse yourself into something. And I've certainly have internalized those perspectives that my mom, who's still alive to this day and still in Brooklyn and East Flatbush, that I made in my own, right?
Yeah.
And what that has translated, quite frankly, is, to me anyway, is the importance of just go for the gusto. Um, I got knocked down many times, and you get back up, right? You grow up in Brooklyn, New York, you're gonna scrap, right? And so not everything's gonna be given to you. You grew up in New York City, you ride the metro or the subway more appropriately. You are surrounded by different people daily, right? People of different reference points, backgrounds, and experiences. And when you're in it and you're growing up in it, you're kind of like, this is life, this is normal, right? I have now time and space since removed from having grown up in New York City to know now those experiences were quite significant. And to also be clear about who I am, right? I'm the kid from Brooklyn, from East Flatbush, Little Haiti, which is, where my family's from. To know that no matter if I went to a predominantly all-boy white school in another part of Brooklyn, or if I went through neighborhoods that were primarily Hispanic, Latinx, or otherwise, that you got to learn how to adapt and deal with the world as it is. So I got introduced to that pretty early on. And so that sort of social awareness, situational awareness just came from look, you kind of have to be vigilant when you grow up in New York City, especially at the time I grew up as a young Black boy. And yes, I did experience those moments of stop and frisk. And yes, those moments didn't feel right. But then I wasn't held to that and letting that define my experience and who I was going to be.
You know what I think? What I realize is the difference. One of the differences between us, Jules, is so I appreciate your disagree. I knew he was going to, first of all, to be clear, I knew he was going to disagree. I just wanted to get my points off with you in front of me. But what I think is a difference is that we are both resilient and adaptable. However, your resilience and adaptability it translates to upward zigzagging in like a corporate context. So like, I'm not going to tell your business on the pod, right? But we had our conversations about what was going on and like your navigation from like one global brand to another global brand to another global brand to another, whatever. Whereas what I picked up from you, your resilience inspired me not to be resilient within the corporate context, even though I ended up zigzagging in corporate for a second as well, but eventually was like, okay, cool. I'm going to go ahead and like build my own, I'm going to continue to build this thing over here.
Yeah.
Right. And so I hear you. I think that two things I want to say is that I think mentorship and inspiration doesn't mean that you come to the same conclusion as a person that you are observing from afar. Mm-hmm. And that you can still learn something, even if the conclusions are not the same.
100%.
I think the other thing I want to say though, as you like continue forward in your journey, and this I think so leads us to more like a workforce of the future conversation, is there are going to be people that see themselves in you, that project their story onto you, and are going to come to my conclusion. Okay. Like, so in terms of, dang, I'm 20 years old. Oh, I'm 25 years old. My bad. I'm 25 years old. So like, let's say the entry level at the, mm-hmm. This is the most senior Black person I've ever seen. This is the most senior, disabled person I've ever seen. This is the most senior insert person I've ever seen. Sure. And they're not being treated how I would expect to be treated. And I might not ever get the same credentials that they get. So damn, what does that mean for my personal journey? And so that's not to necessarily for us to debate about. It's more about like, it's not even really a debate, because I remember when I was at Accenture, Jules, there were people that I met who met you, and there were people who looked like other brothers and like and sisters, right? Just other Black and brown people was like, dog, he should be like a senior cow right? And it's like, dang, okay. And literally it was like, well, wait a minute. If he can't, then what does that mean for us? And that's not to say
Yeah.
that, we can't succeed, whatever. But I'm telling you something about actual observation and people, how they see you, right? Let me pause because you might want to react to that, but I do have a question.
I do. And, that level of seniority, when others see that in you, for me, hearing that, can't help but be touched by that, right? Because when you represent something bigger than yourself to others, it's a privilege. Not even, some might say burden, or it's an expectation. Like, no, it's a privilege, right? To even have that kind of potential ability to influence others and make a difference in their lives. What I would add is clarity for oneself and one's own intention. And what I mean by that very practically is I never had interest in being a cow, right? So like the idea of even wanting to be that, it's like, great, I'm glad you see me as that. I don't see myself as that. And I think that's an important distinction to make, which is be clear, and at least I've tried to live my life, certainly my adult life, by saying, being clear about what's me, what's not me, and what's us. And in being able to differentiate, oh, wow, that is a projection. Interesting. And get curious about that projection without having to take on that projection as my own lived reality. And I only learned how to do this partly because of my clinical training through the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland, the Organization and Systems Development Center, and the many folks in clinical faculty and otherwise in my cohorts who supported me in that learning and personal growth. And but fundamentally be clear about who I am, and also understand that how I may show up and how others see me and how I show up in them may have more meaning to them than it ever will be to me, but it's important to them, and therefore I shouldn't dismiss that importance. It may sound very, what I'm saying may sound a bit esoteric, but it's by no means not meant to be. And I'll give you a very practical example. In 2002, I was at a consulting firm pretty early in my tenure. And there was this incredible article that came out called The Broken Ladder for Consulting Magazine. That was the name of the issue. And they had 5 Black partners from Booz Allen Hamilton at the time on the cover. And one of those individuals who I had a chance to have breakfast with recently, and I said to him, I said, that article and what you represented mattered to me. Now, I didn't know the man, but I can only speak to how he and those others showed up in me, how I made them show up in me. And what I said, I want to be that, right? I want to have that kind of impact, that influence. I want to finish the race, if you will. Certainly in a consulting context, that means making partner. And yet, some of these individuals I never met, and I probably will never meet, but what they represented had impact. And so I understood and understand what that meant for me. And I also understand how I show up might mean to others. And so that's how I hear your statement and receive it in very practical terms. And so very practically also, I'll say one thing I did learn that I have made my own is to the best of my human ability, pay it forward, because Lord knows that there were countless people, black, white, and every other shade in between, who, whether it was 30 minutes, 15 minutes, or an entire decade or more, who said, hey, come here, let me show you something, or come to this meeting, or hey, write this article with me, or here's this client I want you to spend time with, or here's this incredible opportunity I think you'd be good for. And I just felt obligated,
Mm.
and a welcome obligation to try to do that for others. Again, to the best of my human ability.
One I received, right, and I think about the times. Just again, I think about the times that we spent and the conversation we had, because that was before Living Corporate started, and I remember saying, you were probably one of 7 exchanges or moments I had with people that looked like me or maybe didn't look like me, who would take the time to talk to me about the real and be willing to hurt my feelings or have me face my ego, whatever the case is, however you want to frame it, and said, okay, these like moments in time that I've had, either like in a break room when I was pissed off with tears in my eyes, or over breakfast, or after lunch, after work, over drinks. What does it look like to democratize this experience? Because I am extremely outgoing and enterprising, so I'm going to make connections, and I'm going to box people in, and you're gonna have to almost like cuss me out to not give me time. I'm not the average profile. There's plenty of folks out there who sit on the margins who are not like that, but that does not make them any less worthy or right. It does not make them any less rightful to receive coaching, conversation, and frank discussion and real talk.
That's right.
And so, I can definitely say, in terms of the point about just kind of reaching back, and even just the time that you gave was important and critical for me. Talking a little bit more though, like we're going to pause on the unpacking of Jules and talk a little bit more about this idea of leadership, right? Off mic, I was sharing with you that, Living Corporate, we exist in like really these three pillars, right? So we have our e-learning platform, which is like this almost Spotify type experience. Yeah. Create playlists. You can share those playlists within your organization across a myriad of topics, like 1,000 modules. We have brand storytelling, and that's where we are amplifying leaders and helping organizations create copy that they can then leverage and use to drive brand awareness and engagement. Then we have data transformation, right? Where we're taking like data, and we're working across and helping you ingest like your HRS data, your customer experience data, your sentiment data, your salary data, your recruitment data, blah, 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 and giving you like these predictive models.
Amazing.
Thank you. And so we exist in these three arenas, and we've taken the time over the past year to get really disciplined, right? Because a lot of you're like, oh, I have a consulting firm. What do you? We do everything. It's like, no, we do these 3 things, and that's it. And those 3 things are a lot, and we're not trying to necessarily do a ton. We're not really trying to do anything outside of that. I give that conscious say the clients that we're talking to right now, irrespective of whatever service line or service lines that they are interacting or participating or engaging in, we're getting a common thread of, hey, our employees are terrified, right? Like, hey, we're trying to figure out, they don't know what this next era or season of work means. And I tell them, listen, I'm not a policy expert. I'm not on the Hill. I'm not a, what's the word? I'm not a lobbyist. So a lot of those anxieties I can honor, empathize, and frankly, in a lot of different ways, sit in with you. But the feedback I've often, in the kind of where I often take the conversation is around their people, and what is it that you can control, which is your leadership culture. I feel like you used the word esoteric earlier. I think like even now, people hear terms like leadership and leadership culture, and they're dismissive of it, even still. Right? I'm curious, when you think about leadership, and especially leadership in uncertain times, why do you believe it's important?
That's a big question. So I'm going to try to make it smaller and more digestible if I can. I believe this time is no different from any other in terms of leadership in the context of an ambiguous situation. That is, by definition, partly the real sort of fundamental act of leadership, being able to provide direction and engender followership in moments when things are less clear, things are not predictable. There is an element of threat or fear. Um, so you can point to God knows how many moments in the history of mankind, womankind, and so yeah, there was plenty of acts of leadership. But if I narrow it down in the context of U.S. context, post-election 2024, um, what I believe is different this time around with the incoming administration versus 2016 is that no one expected at the then time Donald Trump to win, in a way that there was more preparation for a potential Trump administration, right? And so I actually believe there's probably less ambiguity this time around versus the previous first administration of the incoming administration. I believe that in my heart of hearts. And I think the healthy element of that is it provides people with a bit more certainty around, well, whether you read a Project 2025 or you follow the incoming administration's views around certain policies related to the economy, foreign relations, and otherwise. If you take the time to be well informed, then things will feel less ambiguous, and you won't have to worry about someone else leading per se. I genuinely believe that. That doesn't mean people's anxieties and worries and fears and and hopes and aspirations shouldn't be taken into account. I do believe they should be, right. People's experiences should always be validated as their own. But just because it's yours doesn't mean I have to make it mine. But I will hope for a real shared sense of decency in the workplace. I do believe leaders, no matter what context, private, public, social, government, and otherwise, have the opportunity and, quite frankly, the obligation to do what they've been doing, which is lead, provide clarity of direction, be clear about purpose, right? I always believe don't be an asshole, be good to people, and make sure that the resources that are available to you are made available to others to be the best versions of themselves, to be productive, to enable an enterprise or an institution to produce whatever it's there to produce or there to manufacture and otherwise. And to me, the fundamentals of leadership are still there. The only other thing I would highlight, and then I'll pause, I do believe the ultimate act of leadership is humility. And I don't believe every leader in title has a healthy dose of humility. Some have more doses of that than others. And I do believe there's something, particularly in today's environment, where an act of kindness, an act of humility can really make a difference in someone else's experience. And the more of that humility that's shown and demonstrated, it gives license to others to demonstrate that level of humility with others, because leaders shape culture. And so if you want to understand the culture of an organization, all you have to do is look to the leadership and see how they behave and what they do, and also what they don't do. And that will give you some color, not the complete picture, some color into what this institution cares about and the cultural context. But I also believe culture is not a monolith either. I do believe in microcultures, and leaders who are effective understand how to cultivate and curate microcultures and can orchestrate those cultures to direct them in unison to move towards something that has some shared or some element of commonality. Otherwise, why even have an organization or lead an organization if you can't get everyone rowing in the same direction? But figuring out how do you do that in a way that also preserves and nourishes the microculture or subculture, if you will, of an organization to let it thrive and be nourished for what it's intended to do within its context, but also link that to the broader context. That too is part of the job of leadership.
So, first of all, thank you. It's a fire answer. I recently, Jules, me and my wife, we watched Transformers 1. Have you seen it?
You mean the classic?
No, the new animated movie. I don't know if you watched
the new one. No, I haven't.
Check it out with your kids.
Okay.
It's a little. Well, no, it is a little bit older than mine. So it's not. It's a PG movie. I mean, I think it would be too intense for my.
Zach, you're talking to a big comic book fanatic.
Okay.
I'm anyway. So
no. I got you. No. So look, I'm not gonna spoil it too hard, but there's this idea within the movie. And I think a lot of times in a lot of these comic book films and movies, to your point about nerding out, we won't. Maybe that'll get you here back on the pod sooner. We could do a comic book episode. But it's this idea about power, right? So, it's like, hey, there's a veneer of sociability and humility and meekness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even niceness. There's that's the front end. But the through line of all of it is power collection. And I'm curious, in your, I don't want to call it expertise, right, to the early part of our conversation, but in your realm of deep understanding, where does power and the need and power collection and power preservation come into the idea of leadership? And at what point, if at all, does power and the need to collect and preserve it create harm for organizational culture?
There's a lot to respond to in your question. So I'll start by saying I may not get to all the facets of what you described, but will certainly do my best to offer perspective. Let me start with, I don't believe power is a bad thing. People hear that word. There's a negative valence that's associated with it, right? For some people, power may be just, I don't like that word, I'm going to use influence. Whatever, right? I also believe no one really has power. The only way you get power is when others give it to you willingly, in most cases, not in all cases, right? Certainly in a democracy, whereas in autocracy, it's a little different, right? And so if you buy that for a moment, that being power is given to you by some collective, and you buy the notion that power also means that you have the ability to influence others and things, then my sense is that in the workplace, that power, real power, is one that's truly distributed and shared, right? Within reason. And what I mean by within reason, the reason why I say that is context matters, right? If you're in a military operation and you are being deployed to a particular part of the world and a war-torn zone, then the chain of command really matters, and who has power and the sort of delegation of authority, that matters, right? Hierarchy plays a role and the like. So power is associated to hierarchy in that regard. Whereas in other instances where perhaps a bit more of a democratic uh, operating model or way of operating is more of the norm, then seeking diverse perspectives and going with the best answer, regardless of where it comes from, certainly has been true in my consulting career and even my industry career in technology, where the real power comes from the collective and where others can have enough humility to say, no, this is the best answer, not my answer, but our best answer, right? And it's the shift from I to we, from you or me to us, that if you want to really understand how power works, it's about give and take, right? I can't expect to have power if I'm not willing to give some power away, right? And vice versa. And so others have to receive that. And that's what, quite frankly, when people are given opportunities to take on more responsibility, that's power being given away intentionally within the context. And so I sometimes wonder why people use this word power as this loaded language when all it is just giving someone the opportunity to influence and direct and do things that they perhaps would not always ordinarily be able to do, absent of someone saying, hey, we want to give you license to do it. You have real authority or delegation of authority to do it and the like. But again, everything in a context, and you have to understand whether that context is a for-profit institution or a publicly listed institution, whether you sit on a board or an executive team, or whether you sit on the front line in a manufacturing plant, right? You have to pay attention to your environment. And in that regard, I do think then you'll understand how power should be exercised. And look, I mean, at the end of the day, there's I'm not going to be naive about it either, right? And there are people who want it, there are people who have it and don't want it, and there are people who have it and may not always know how best to exercise it. But I think for those who are in positions and in roles and have the privilege to exercise power in ways that hopefully benefits others, I would take note and pay attention to how that occurs. And so that to me, for me, is one version of how I think about power in a democratic context.
Jules, I told you we'd get you out of here in time. We not, but I'm going to wrap it up. Okay. So, I think I have two last questions for you.
Go for it.
And I think they go together. Is, when I met you, we were younger men, right? It was a decade ago, right? Mm-hmm. You're now not middle-aged, but you're now like in the senior executive you're at that senior executive stage, I believe, of your career. That, at least outside looking, that's what it looks like to me. You were an executive when I met you a decade ago, so I think that's reasonable. And you were then, and now you are even more now, somebody that is going to be looking, or rather that the future of work is going to be looking at, right? We talked about that earlier. Mm. So my paired two-parter is, what are you excited about as you continue forward in your journey and take on whatever the next phase of your career is? What impact are you excited to create and leave? And then what is it that you believe the future of work, like this Gen Z, I'm going to say Gen Z, not Gen Alpha, Gen Z coming in, mm-hmm. What do you believe is going to be critical for them to be successful?
I love the questions. By the way, I would say I'm still in the early innings of my professional career. And I mean that in all sincerity, partly because if any of you or your viewers or listeners are familiar with Viktor Frankl's Seasons of a Man's Life, I think it applies to women and beyond. We can define when we feel like there is sort of a shift happening in what we pay attention to and what we not pay attention to in our own sense of being and what comes with that, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and the like. And so, with that as a frame, this next chapter of my life, in how I think about this next season, and the thing I get excited about is uh, continued excitement around technology in frontier technologies like Gen AI and the like that will continue to benefit humanity. And we have and we are and we will continue to see the real benefits of how technology has always enabled our livelihoods to be better, right? So I'm really anxious in a good way, productive way, about the next evolution of uh, frontier technologies, A technologies, specifically autonomous vehicles or autonomous aircrafts and the like. I do believe that's just going to be an exciting space all around because I think what it will do for urban planning, for the planet in terms of our carbon footprint and otherwise, I think autonomous technology and combined with the continued push towards the electrification of everything, we're really just at the sort of nascent stages of the possibilities there. So that gets me excited. But there's a through line there for me that's even more personal. You mentioned we've known each other for about a decade or so. And during that period of time, I became a father. And so during that period of time, what became clearer to me, or what I became clearer about, was the importance of the opportunities and the privileges I have to affect organizations and the communities I get to live and operate within to pave a path for my children. I have a daughter who's 10 years old and a son who's 9. And as I believe that the world is a good place, I want to make it a better place for what my children will inherit in whatever way and contribution I can make that's meaningful. So that too, maybe not so much in the excitement bucket, but more in the purpose bucket. And the thing I would leave with this next generation, and certainly all the other generations that are still in the workforce, because they're not all of them are going anywhere, right?
Right.
Let's acknowledge the what is, not the what will be. The what is that there are at least 5, maybe even 6 generations in the workforce. And my simple message is one I've certainly tried to apply to my own career, which is one, if you're going to be good at something, be really good at it. And more importantly, make sure others know you're going to be good at it. Right? In the true sense, it's really the pursuit of self-mastery. And if you're clear about this, you'll know you'll never done. And you'll never be a master if you really are in pursuit of it. It's a pursuit, right? I think it was Bruce Lee that once said the opponent he most fears is not the opponent that can do 10,000 things. It's the opponent that can do the same kick over that's done it 10,000 times or more. Be really good at what you're going to be good at and make sure others know it. The second is certainly my frame of reference, because I've spent a lot of time in the world of consulting, but not limited to consulting, is organizations primarily are made up of people. And at the end of the day, people are going to be drawn to and drawn by people that give them energy, not the people that deplete their energy. And my basic belief is try your best to be a good person, and how you would want to be a good person, and how you would want others to be good to you. And because at the end of the day, people who are energized by your presence are going to want to spend more time with you. The people who are depleted by your presence and the energy, or they feel like you take away their energy, will want to spend less time with you, right? So you can make whatever sense out of that in whatever way is meaningful for you and certainly for your viewers and listeners. But I do believe something about the act of being interesting enough in a productive way, that folks want to spend more time with you. And you even noted earlier and commented on my physical appearance. Well, that's partly because if I take pride in how I look, and maybe every now and then put on some interesting things that will spark people's interest and curiosity to want to get to know me, right? So that's what human relationship is about: getting interested, being curious, and engaging others. Thirdly, that I would leave with different generations at work. And for some, it's a relearning. For others, it's a new learning, which is be committed to an ideal or an idea, right? I think one of the things that makes the difference in the world of work is when people have innovations. And I want to clarify and specify specifically innovation, not invention, although there's room for that too. Innovations can be small and incremental, but can really move the needle. And, in some places you might even hear that as have a point of view, have a perspective, right? Have a view about a stance on something, have an idea, a conviction, whatever it is, in whatever language resonates most with others. But this belief that you have an idea and a belief system that you're willing to move towards and enact. But the caveat there, and it is a caveat, is be open to that idea or that belief system to be challenged. And when necessary, let go of it if it no longer serves you. To be open to new possibilities, new learnings, right? And so I think if you have a healthy dose of learning and relearning, that you'll always be in a place where you have the ability to renew. And so, again, just as a recap, if you're going to be committed to something, commit to being really good at it and being known for it. Two, be sure that as you navigate this world of professional context or otherwise, as an entrepreneur, in your case, a founder, CEO, or as someone who sits inside an institution, that you remember it's in relation to others that things can happen. And then thirdly, the power of an idea can make a real difference, both in innovation and invention. But have a stance, and don't be afraid to have that stance be challenged either. And so I leave you with that.
Dr. Claudy Jules, again, mentor, personal inspiration, personal friend, and now friend of the show Living Corporate. I look forward to us keeping in contact. I'm excited about what you got going next. And I'm excited. I'm excited to say that when I turn this little button off, I'm gonna still be texting you. We're in community. So listen, brother, God bless you. We will talk to you soon. Make sure if y'all want to connect with Dr. Jules, Dr. Claudy Jules, y'all make sure to click the link in the show notes, learn more about what he has going on, and peace, man.
Thank you, brother. Be well.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.